So if all agree, we make a recording here and also here so that we have two camera options, yeah. So that we have one in front and one is here, because this is so from the heaven and this is...
Okay.
I think it's already.
Okay, so welcome Vera Bühlmann, welcome all on the internet, yeah, on Zoom. So we have the next session of our reading group at the University Vienna, Department of Philosophy. As you know, some of you know that we are having this reading group since about 1.5 years. And after some sessions of reading, we always invite an expert, external scholar, yeah, to speak about a topic which is in connection to the reading circle, psychoanalysis, gender theory, and poststructuralism. It's a very difficult name. I always forget it again. So welcome all. And of course, a special welcome to Vera Bühlmann, who is here right now. As you see, we don't have it just on Zoom, but in a hybrid form. So some are sitting here in the Department of Philosophy, some are on Zoom. And the title of your lecture, at least if you really hold your promises, Hamacher probably would say, if you hold your promise, a title has always a promise up to a certain way. Yeah? And the promise is the without and the without, the out with and the without, which remembers me a little bit to Derrida, who was always playing with this without. And the subtitle promises that it will go about the relation about the digital world and philology. So I'm very eager to know and learn more about this relation from you. So how the procedure will be as always. So how long will your lecture be approximately today?
I can scale. I was preparing, hoping for maybe 50 minutes, an hour.
Yes,
like
that's fine. So Ralph, I will give over to Ralph Giesinger. Thank you, like always, Ralph, for organizing the reading circle and all the work, doing the work behind. So Ralph will give a short introduction to Vera Bühlmann, right now, and then we will have the lecture. And then probably we will have some small replies or comments here and 5-10 minutes, but then we will have 15 minutes break, yeah, so that everybody can have coffee. And after the break, like always, we will have an extensive Q&A session.
Nice.
Yeah. Okay. So Vera and Ralph, I give over.
Yeah. Thank you. Very welcome also from my side to you. Okay. Perfect. So yeah, Werner Bühlmann is a professor for architecture theory at the TU in Vienna here, so at the Technische Universität Wien, where she directs the research unit Architecture Theory and Philosophy of Technics. So there are so many publications, so I won't start really to name, but I just want to say that there are these like her two important monographs that was in German from 2014, Die Nachricht, ein Medium, städtische Architektonik, generische Medialität, and really recently, 2020, this very important book on Michel Serres, Information and Mathematics in the Philosophy of Michel Serres. And now you have a new book project. I think it already was published this January. So yeah, so I think the talk will also be around this topic. So the book is called The Digital, A Continent, Nature and Poetics. So very promising indeed. Yeah, we in the reading circle read the text of Bühlmann, Methods and the Comma, Mathematics of Human Knowledge. We had 2 sessions where we discussed the text. And now we also included the 2 texts of Werner Hamacher, Vera Bühlmann sent to us on the thesis on philology, 95 thesis on philology, and the text Tempore from Hamacher. So yeah, I think the idea was just to have this opportunity to connect in Vienna between the different philosophical fields from the University of Vienna with TU Vienna, because yeah, it's a pity you said that it's the first time you're really here at this department. So yeah, again, very welcome, and we're happy that we can have this connection.
Well, thank you both very much. I was really pleased and happy to be here. And I will share this screen now. So this is a kind of a legacy from the Corona year, where I suddenly had to do so many lectures online. So I kind of developed a mode with which I'm quite comfortable, because it's very free. It's almost a bit, I can scale and tune very much with the situation. But the bad thing of it is that I don't write anymore. I don't write manuscripts anymore. But it's much easier to connect to an audience, actually. So I prepared this talk like this as well. The book that you were mentioning is basically the manuscript before I stopped doing that. So it's not really a monograph. It's a kind of a collection of essays that emerged around also the work on Michel Serres, which has been for me, almost 10 years now, actually. 14, I kind of really started to concentrate. And I'm hoping to get out of it soon, but not leaving it behind, of course. And the lecture today is, what I try to do is, in this lecture now, to give something a bit like a mold or the negative form in which this text that you have already looked at kind of came together. Because I'm aware of that, and I would like to feel that it's a good thing. I'm not sure yet, but I very much think of my work now, since I'm here, especially in Vienna, working with architects mainly, and I'm not an architect and I'm not an art historian. So a bit of a stranger in this position. I feel a bit like a storyteller. Yeah, so it's a bit like storytelling, but not science fiction. So it has much more to do with mathematical thinking, with, I like to really re-evoke this legacy of natural philosophy, Naturphilosophie. And what I would like to speak about today is about, so it's more storytelling, but like from the complementary or the inverse direction than the text. The text tried to put forward complicated notions of the public, the private, the intimate, then the demiurge and architectonics, and the particular and the universal, in a way which, at least as I'm aware, doesn't really follow, let's say, a certain discourse that engages in that, but kind of draws from many different fields. And which different fields, this is what I would like to speak a little bit about here. And so for me, it's always very welcome, if you like, when I'm going too fast or you can't make the connection, please feel free to just interrupt me. It's welcome. Or of course, we can also discuss it afterwards. And so serious storytelling, something like that. I hope I managed to capture some humor. Even so, I chose one motif for this lecture, and it's a depiction of Eidos, the goddess of shame. Shame, modesty, respect, and humility. And it's not that I know a lot about Eidos, it's more, it kind of crystallized. I hope, I will be able to show shortly how and why this issue of shame has a lot to do with the idea of an out with, a relation that I call an out with. And then a colleague of mine sent me this reference to Eidos, whom I don't even know a single story about. But it's good to have kind of a motivic key. I always like to do this now for the lectures. And there's another one, because I would like to kind of also go via this book of the digital continent, because in there I try to kind of contain both of these inverse poles, let's say. This one here is a little figure from the 4th century, I think, of Polyphemus. And Polyphemus was the cyclope, no, which Homer is killing. And his name literally means abounding in songs and legends, many-voiced. No? And so it's a complicated relationship. When I'm saying I'm not entirely sure if storytelling is a good thing, it has something to do with this fate or this role of this abundance in legends. So if storytelling wouldn't go to kind of a social construction or Bildungsroman or a kind of a pedagogical task, let's say, but join forces with natural philosophy and metaphysics. It's a complicated role, and I came to think about Polyphemus through an Italian geographer with whom whose work I kind of encountered last summer. Hey. This is Franco Farinelli, and there is quite an interesting, so for me, I never got a relation to geography that would not primarily be about mapping, no? And then with mapping, positivizing territory, being very territorial. And the way that he opens this book is was super surprising for me. He says geography begins with the blinding of Polyphemus, because Polyphemus, as the cyclope, has the sight, so everything is synchronically in sight for him. And he says, with the blinding of Polyphemus, it's the mythical plot that something like making models of the world comes to the fore. But this making models is not like a variation of a lost originality, but geography itself becomes like a writing the world, no? in this idea. And he has a beautiful opening passage for this, which I think is good for us to remember today when everything kind of totalizes in notions of climate and saving the earth, basically. He begins the book by saying there are two names of the earth. He says geography is the description of the earth. This has been repeated for centuries, but this is not true, because in the meantime, the most important thing has been forgotten, that it is exactly through this description that the world is reduced to the earth to its surface, and this surface to a table. No? So there is a kind of a reduction when we speak of the earth, whereby the notion of the world, at least in the way that I want to relate to it, evokes the notion of the cosmos. And the cosmos, in this old tradition, in a I don't know, I think perhaps least disputable sense, means the world is a kind of a living thing. It's an animate thing. It's a being which lives, which is alive. So it's an animism, if you want, in a certain way. But this gives a bit the scope. So this relation of poetics and nature tries to regain a relation to the cosmos, which is not as straightforwardly cosmotechnics like Yukui would have it. No? So I would like it to be more unnecessary. so far-fetched. The things should be far-fetched and yet totally near at hand. No? So this, for me, in Yuke's work, is always a bit pragmaticist. But it's a nuance. So, but a relation to the cosmos, which doesn't mean to kind of produce ideologies which have a programmatics and which kind of believe that there can be a kind of a political will to take over this role that religion has lost with industrialization. It doesn't go in that direction that much. It's much more in that sense with Polyphemus, the abundance of legends and stories. So how, because it's an interesting question, how do we make something interesting if there's an abundance of it? So in a recent text, I left it out, but maybe I mention it quickly because it was interesting how much it offended the reviewers of this text. It was for an issue on Michel Serres, and I proposed to read Serres as a kind of a positivism of luxuriation. And this connection of luxuriation with positivism is scandalous, apparently, to many people. But it's actually what I'm interested in very much. So there is a luxury is of course not the moralist Latin reading, I derive it from the Greek term where it's polyteleia, and it means so many teloi acting together, no hierarchy among them, so no linearity, no progress in that sense, many directions, which kind of conflude, which need to be, I would say today that's the architectonic idea, proportioned, brought into proportions for things. So another way to kind of frame what I hope it is that I am doing, it's a form of a critical rationalism, but not exactly in Popper's sense, again, no? Because Popper, of course, goes with the falsification, and then ultimately the critical rationalism basically hopes to build a more stable foundation which progresses. And instead of this foundation which progresses, I like very much the notion of a meridian architectonics. So the architectonics we will see in relation to the cosmos, or to this to the world, which is not just the Earth, of course, also the Earth, but also cosmos. And the meridian is this notion I started to come across through Hamacher and Paul Celan. And I think it's an extremely powerful and promising notion today, because what it gives us is, of course, standard time, the meridian, but there's not only this one meridian, no, which gives us standard time. In principle, there are as many meridians as we want to draw, and all of them cross equator. So they give a kind of it's almost like like a topology actually of making world models, and it puts, instead of having an original or a representation and reference relation, it gives us a kind of an axiality with the equator and with the standard. No? So the kind of the continuity where things are morphing into one another, which is more the domain of metamorphosis and all these continuous transformations, and then the cuts or the digitization with the standard. So I do share with Popper that if there is something like a free will, it has to do with the rational. No? So differently from what when I was studying, I was never studying mathematics. I hated mathematics when I was in school, precisely because I was taught in mathematics no will is necessary. No? So in mathematics, things they're necessary if they work. As they are, there's nothing to interpret. There's just following rules. I was totally opposing this. But of course, this is a certain tradition of understanding the role of mathematics, which is not much older than 100 years or so. And that was my turnout. The first book you mentioned, 2014, this was, at the core, it was my PhD, which was in media studies with Georg Tholen, who was also a friend of Hamacher, but at that time I refused him. Yeah, but there's always affect stories related to these philosophical loves, of course. But where it led me basically is to find a different relation to mathematical thinking, which in media studies I could not encounter. And it kind of crystallized with, at one point I realized the Rechner is totally wrong, because the computer is algebra, it's not arithmetics. No? So logicism, which goes with arithmetics, makes so many presuppositions which are not at all necessary. And they are also quite horrifying in certain ways. If we don't relate, so by now I reconciled this with this as well, because arithmetics relating it to the Pythagorean legacy is an entirely different story than to concepts and logicism basically. So this is a bit of the background, and the promise that I personally see with this notion of the out with is to kind of find a way to develop an affirmative, a relaxed relation, let's say, to forgetting. I think we are, especially with the digital, really obsessed with controlling how things are kept in synchronicity, and with archiving and storing, and with the historization of everything as well. So I would say there's almost no theory thought anymore as theory. Everything becomes historiography. Everything becomes history primarily. And the two are not the same. No, it's a bit like the Earth is the world is revealed to the Earth with history. So there is something about a theory which I would claim what they called it, no, architectonics. So it has to do with mathematics, it has to do with abstraction, with intellect, not primarily with sensibility and with the body, but also not in competition with it either. So yeah, we need to, I say, so forgetting, no, but how can we have a relation to forgetting? Because it would have to be one, of course, which is not whitewashing, no, which is not, so there is the issue of trespass, of guilt, of things which need to be remembered, all of the historical real aspects. And of course, what I don't mean that this should be what we need to learn to forget, obviously. So it's a very tricky idea to kind of speak about the possibility, let's say, of an affirmative relation to forgetting. And the way that for me it works is through mathematics, through the mathematical thinking, and this notion of anamnesis, or a remembering, which is there. I don't think I will dare to go there in much detail today. It's not sorted out for me, but the notion of the out with is a bit like a park of statues, maybe. No, of things that would be forgotten in that sense. So this mathematics. This here is a citation from I think, very powerful, but for me it was also quite disturbing, because it threw me right back into my media theory backgrounds that I had really left more than 10 years ago. It's by a colleague from Linz, actually. I didn't know. She wrote a beautiful text über die Tafel, on the blackboard, as a universal medium. That was her take. And her aspect is to say, even immaterial objects have a place where they are produced. And what to me is more interesting is the notion of the place, not the production. I think it's not right with the production, to call it a production, because it's invention, it's graphism, it's all sorts of things. It's not just fabrication in the sense of production. But to say that, how could we think of a place? Where does this happen? So for her, it's the blackboard, and it's a strong, I have some slides to give you a little bit an insight into the argumentation, because it's making such a difficult and such a polluted story around this ideality of mathematics really quite strikingly graspable like this. So I appreciate the text greatly for doing that. I will come back to this in a little bit, because the first I want to, so this will not be the way of speaking of the outways that I like. I want to evoke the one I like first. And for this, there is a short text. It's only 2 pages by Leibniz, which I think is very important for Michel Serres' book on Leibniz. So Serres' PhD thesis, it was published in the same year, so 68. Like difference and repetition, and of grammatology and so on. But it has not until today been translated. And I'm working on a translation now with colleagues. So a lot of Leibniz-Serrian Leibniz thinking. And there is this one text by Leibniz, which I think is a bit of a motivic key for Serres' relation. And it's the text entitled Was eine Idee sei. And I can make this a bit larger. Well, Leibniz here says very kind of unconvoluted and straightforward. No, vor allem aber verstehen wir unter dem Namen einer Idee etwas, das in unserem Geist ist. Die dem Gehirn eingeprägten Spuren sind also keine Ideen. Für sicher nämlich nehme ich es, dass der Geist etwas anderes ist als das Gehirn oder als ein feinerer Teil von der Substanz des Gehirns. Also Gedanken, perceptions, affects, all of these things, he would say, they have something to do with ideas, but ideas are something which are in our minds. I would translate Geist with mind, perhaps. I'm not sure, or spirit. No, it's all, you know what the implications are. I'm not sure. So Geist, let's say Geist. but it's in. So there's a relation of containment. It's not that Geist is all idea. No? So there is a kind of an interiority, exteriority relation between the two. And this is interesting. Leibniz then relates it to an act in thinking, eine gewisse Fähigkeit zu denken, so a capability to think, but also eine Anlage an eine Sache zu denken, so a disposition as well. No? The ideas. So the ideas are at once in this thing we call Geist, but they're also a disposition, and they're also a certain kind of capability. And his difficult notion then is, okay, to say what an idea is, perhaps needs to be put in a double articulation. So an idea is not that which leads to a certain reference, to eine Sache führt, but that which also expresses it. So expression and method kind of coincide. And this is the core that Serre makes out of what he calls le système de Leibniz, essai modèle mathématique. So the key turn is to say, yes, Leibniz is a systematical philosopher, but precisely in that the system will never be self-contained in a representational sense. So Leibniz is a systematic philosopher because this system always needs to be modeled mathematically. And there is not one way to model this system mathematically. This is where the pluralism coincides or pulsates with this animism of the monas in Leibniz's sense. And Serre's whole book is about that. And it's really striking. The only thing basically that he picks up in Leibniz and repostulates today is to say mathematics is not one. So topology, geometry, arithmetics, algebra, harmonics, and then all the smaller distinctions like the conic sections and the stereographic projection, and so they are all not one. Not one, very much in a sense, like I understand Lucy Irigaray with regard to the question of sex. So which is also interesting because it puts to the foreground a notion of sex with mathematics, not gender. So not social construction. Yeah, I will come back to this as well, but this is the ambition. The outwith would be a domain which can kind of accommodate ideas. No, so it's a way of thinking the cosmos such that this cosmos can accommodate ideas in such a manner. Nothing about these ideas is necessary, and the ideas don't maintain a relation of similarity to what they grasp or what they contain or what they do, but rather always a relation of analogy. And this distinction is crucial for the architectonics. No? A similarity is between two terms. An analogy involves four terms. So an analogy is the key formula for thinking proportions in the architectonic sense. You have A is to B, like C is to D. You have four different terms, and the analogy corresponds to the relation between two couples or two pairs. So these were the ideas. These were the ideas that kind of put me to this title. It was a bit of a. I was of course not sure about the title, but I started to work with it, the digital continent, because of this relation of the continent, and the contained, and not the content. No? So it's a way of bracketing out the notion of content, which always brings us to the representational, to the similarity, to the couple of two terms thinking. So the relation of continent and contained very much evokes such an architectonics that needs to be modeling the systems or the cosmos. And in a way, this text which you read, so about methods and the comma, mathematics of human knowledge, it's not in the book. It was written after the text in the book, but it's a kind of a sculpting out of the main idea that the different texts in the book contain. What interferes, if you want, in so this is it. This no, it goes then with this four-term relationship. So analogy, it's with the quadrivium. So it's with the kind of a rationality that evolves around 4 terms. And what I was interested, or getting more and more interested here, and this is also a bit the direction through which Hamacher is so interesting, or his notion of philology, is the trivium, or both of them together. And what is not yet in this book is really this notion of the comma as the lambda. So it's something everybody should be taught. I think. How can we be introduced to the internet and to informatics and to coding and to the lambda calculus, because that's which summarizes everything, without knowing about the Pythagorean comma? I don't understand, no, because it's a kind of a reservoir. It's a kind of a thing which really shows there is incommensurability at the basis of rationalizing things. There is incommensurability, and it's a liberating thing that there is incommensurability. No, it's not a social construction. So, or at least there is a physical phenomenon that grasps it. No, in music with this sound. I'm not trained in music. I'm quite illiterate, so I don't dare to speak about that. But it's the thing that when you raise, when you in the scales, when you repeat, there is a divergence which emerges, and one cannot explain as a perceivable phenomena. So the comma then, and the 7 liberal arts, or the fourfold and the triad, or the tripod. So how to regain access to these things. For Serre, the way to gain access to these things, and that was what captured me so much when I started to really read him, not just to enjoy his poetic voice, but to really do research. What is he talking about? It was such a good thing. He doesn't give all these discursive footnotes, because then you get just tied up in very short-sighted and very socially relevant, but philosophically not that relevant, territorial positioning games. So he just gives the ideas, he names the main thinkers without showing how, and then one has to go there and look at these thinkers, and it works. It starts to make sense, and it's a way then how what Serre writes about is not taking you into his obligation, it's setting you free. So yeah, I'm still quite excited about that way of working. One text that is important for him is this one here on the gnomon, because the gnomon gives us a very different relation to geometry than the one of this story, not that we will turn to now shortly. So this is the hate story here. This is more of a love affair here. No, so so he says, so the Greek in antiquity was never a unity. No, so they were fighting between the city-states, between the languages, between the schools, the philosophers against the sophists. It's weird that we kind of make reference to Greek antiquity as if it were kind of a unified empire or something like that. But then at the same time, he says, what is the legacy from that time is that the whole world, meanwhile, is unified by speaking mathematics. So we still describe the world with logarithms, we still describe geometry with triangles, with points. These notions that theoretical mathematics introduced in Greek philosophy, Serre looks at it as a kind of language, and it's what the whole world speaks. And of course, the whole world is not a unified empire or a whole. No, so there's a kind of, we call this an diachronic, of course, relation that has the potential to be peace a bit more. not totally, of course. So this is what I got interested in to rethink mathematics. So how are we taught this? And the key thing now, that I will not go into that, but the gnomon is the sun clock. No? So it's basically, in antiquity, it was the device with which people were doing geometry, because it gives the shadow every day at the same time in the same proportion. So the story that Sarah likes to say about it is that Thales, no, we celebrated for inventing it. He said, no. Thales was in Egypt, and he wanted to measure the pyramids. But of course, the pyramids are immense. So it's a sacrilege to say it's a nameable magnitude, because it contains the whole of history, no, for the other religion. So what Thales figured out is, well, I don't need to make this offense. I can say, I don't know how large the pyramid is. I can just say, in proportion to how large I am, it is like that. And this leaves free to say how large one is, oneself, as a reference. So it doesn't give a representation or a definition of the reference. And it doesn't try to give a definition of the thing that is put in relation with it. So this is the key story, and this goes with the gnomon. So that Thales figured out that he can take his shadow and he can take the shadow of the pyramid, and then he gets a scale. So they are in proportion to one another. And then, of course, what the sun clock also says, that we might celebrate geometry as being timeless. No? So that's the thing with the geometry. They are out of time. No? So they are valid today as they were whenever we want. No, they're always the same, but they are given through light. And light is the source of time. At that time as well, so that's why it was a clock. It was a measuring stick, but it was also a clock. And the meridian, again, is it gives us the standard time. So it's a kind of a relation to, so it relates geometry to a physics of time. That's the thing. To a physics of time, which is not history, which is not just chronology, as if the units in which we count time would be non-problematic. It is also not time as a kind of a dominant subject. It's a part of natural philosophy through light. And geometry starts when we say, okay, we bracket out the source of it. We pretend, because we take the same moment in which we know the angle will be right, so the 90-degree angle. So we stop time in order to win the forums, but we should not forget that we have stopped time. No? So it's a kind of and I call this an abduction. No, it's a stealing of a reference to refer to what geometry refers to, out of the reality in which the world breathes. No? The cosmos is alive, or the earth is vivid, or whatever we want to say about this. So a notion of space through geometry is abducted. It's stolen, or stolen out of time. So there's a trespassing. There is a kind of an impure act at the beginning of geometry, and for Serre, this is a good thing. So this is a good thing. It's the position which puts him so much at odds with the logicist and the empiricist approaches in philosophy in the 20th century. But it's also the one which allows him to see how these old mechanics, let's say, of a physics of light relate to the dominance of algorithms today and to artificial intelligence. So Serre goes as far in this text as saying the gnomon is an artificial intelligence, the artificial intelligence proper to the world itself, because it is how the world reads in itself what it itself has inscribed in itself. No? Because everything that we read in the world in a geographical sense is of course drawn from map making, from sketching, from geometry, from measuring the earth or the world. But it has also been figured out as a means with which we can do geography. So it's this relation of Polyphemos. So there is this death of Polyphemos, the site in synchronicity, the cyclope is killed. And taking things into sight is where the human intellect prospers towards. So that's a bit the background here. And I don't think this relation of the gnomon and AI is exhausted today. I think it's just about to start to become a wider topic. I remember 6 years when this context where I used to work before here at ETH, it's a chair for digital architectonics. We met this mathematician who was coming to the same things like Sarah. I had no idea with mathematics, and we started to collaborate, and we have this group called Digital Mnemonics because of that, so to relate it to AI. And I want to give a very short kind of framing where these topics go by referring to this book you might know by Catherine Malabou. I really think it's an important book, Morphing Intelligence. It's this one here, From IQ Measurement to the Artificial Brains. I think it's from 19 or maybe 21, I don't know, it's quite recent. And what is extraordinary, or for me was extraordinary about it, is that the question she asks is, with this interest of a kind of a historian of science in the best sense, she wanted to know how did it come about that people started to think in the 19th century that intelligence is something that first of all needs to be measured and can be measured. So what were the stories that kind of triggered these fantasies among the scientists? And it was super surprising to read. A lot of it is captured, I think, in this foreword that the translator wrote. There is a relation between metis and translation. No? So the way that she approaches the question of the IQ measurement is not saying this model has flaws or it produces these biases and another model produces these biases. She's not doing this kind of graphism, no, and comparison. She really wants to know how did they come about to think of these models. And that framing of her quest, the translator describes it as itself an act of translation and involving metis. Metis is cunning, it's cunning reason. Metis was the mythical figure in antiquity. She was the first wife of Zeus. Yes, she was the first wife of Zeus before Hera, before he became big. And how did it come about? I think Zeus swallowed her. Eleni, you know this. Our Greek scholar.
I don't remember it.
You don't remember it. Okay. So in its meaning for today, metis is eine Kopfgeburt. It's born out of the head. And I think Zeus swallowed her, and he had such headache that he kind of. Huh?
That's Athena.
And then Athena was born. That's it, exactly. Athena was the Kopfgeburt, which was conceived from Zeus swallowing Metis, because she was always tricking him, and he could not control her. Metis is cunning reason, and it's a female notion of intellect, which I think is significant. So this is Metis, and what they both do. I mean, I don't know how, so it doesn't matter. But it's nice that the translator puts this in the foreword to say what Catherine Malabou was trying to do between these models of how to measure IQ was, on the one hand, a kind of a translation project, but she knew that it's not that there is an original text that I can calibrate with. So I don't know what it's like the Rosetta Stone. So you have several transcriptions of it, but you need to figure out what the message was. So this is what she describes about it. And what comes to the fore, of course, very much is, if you like Deleuze, you will be familiar with Bergson, no? With his critique on space, with his emphasis on intuition and on the role of intuition and the relation of intuition then to freedom and this notion of time. And what Malabou struggles with and kind of begins to put to the foreground is that this rejection of the role of space that Bergson rightly accused is not the mathematical notion of space. So it's a shortcut already that she wants to attend to differently. And she makes, so there are I cannot summarize this in any way that would do it justice. I just recommend it's the first text. It's about 40 pages in this book, which gives a very surprising history of what it means to take measure, no? And to make a certain phenomena measurable. What is significant is that these stations, let's say, in the 19th century, so against which people like Bergson then were so, that they wanted to get rid of it, is something that happened without intention. So she shows through these documents how the mathematicians who came up with saying the intellect is something we need to measure did not have a classifying and eugenic program in mind, but they were working out of a real problem that was kind of the legacy of Kantianism with the forms of intuition, because it censored the thinking with certain mathematical ideas that could not be accommodated in the Kantian architectonic. It censored the thinking with these ideas, while at the same time in thermodynamics and in quantum physics, they were ubiquitous. No? And it's a clash that we still have today. So it's essentially the complex number plane and then abstract algebra, so category theory and higher abstractions. So everything that goes out of the real number line, no? That builds bodies, numerical bodies or things like that. The Kantian legacy of architectonic has no way to attend to these things. And the way that she draws this history is she shows how these people in the 19th century, they wanted to invent ways of how the Kantian legacy could be tempered, could be brought to a proportion with the new theories, with the new approaches in physics that were getting more and more into conflict with this idea of enlightenment and modern and secular philosophy. So their intentions were the opposite of what then their theories had been put to use for. And I think this is important for today, because we are with the ChatGPT and with this kind of artificial general intelligence, it's very powerful what is happening. And it's not like there is I'm very convinced that there is not one necessary output to this whole thing. No, yeah. Okay, so the intellect. Serre's philosophy helps to kind of make sense with this. How long am I speaking?
Now it's been like 40 minutes.
Okay, I have a little bit more. So then, how does this relate to Hamacher and this extempore? Hamacher concentrates very much in this text on Kantian philosophy. And but he puts, I need to take another citation to make the point clearer. Maybe here. So he adds something to the reasoning of in Kant. So in Kant, he says, time is the relation of representation. So representation as a relation. And Hamacher says, that's one side of it. The other side of it is that receptivity involves an activity on the affective level. So just like time is, if you want, the absolute or the form, let's say, it gives a formality to how we can grasp representation as a relation, not as an act. He says receptivity or affectivity, I don't know, I'm not sure how the proportion now would be, but receptivity is not like things are entering an empty vessel. No? So there is the reception of the relation of representation, whose absolute is time. The reception of it as a similarly active and also oscillating relation which is giving attention, paying attention, concentrating, being affected, and being self-affected. So the receptivity and the representation start to form a relation of analogy, no? Or four terms. And through bringing it to this domain of the, I think he calls it also form activity. So this faculty of receptivity, which is active in itself, he gets an outside to time that is total in the Kantian approach. And I think this is what he has in mind with the ex tempore. No? So I imagine it's a bit similar, like when I like to say with the gnomon, and that space, or the space that geometry deals with, is abducted. It's a similar gesture that Hamacher does with time. That's as far as I got until now, without having studied this for a very long time. No? So, but these are the symmetries that make it so promising for me. And he as well, like Bergson, puts the term of intuition central to think this. So this is intuition. He says intuition is this receptivity as an active relation. So intuition, again, comes to have its relation to time and to the free will, like in Bergson, but it works through a notion of space, which is not the one that Bergson was criticizing. The notion of space that Hamacher evokes is through a primacy of place, not through an abstract architectonic construction. And the primacy of place is this notion of the amphora. Aristotle had called the notion of place amphora. I will, well, I can bring it now, I think. The amphora. Yeah, no, I don't. I get confused. But yeah, you know this. So a place goes through a notion of amphora, and the amphora is not an empty vessel. No, it's a vessel that transports something while having an exterior relation to what it contains. So that's again the thing, the continent and the containing, but what is the content is unaffected by the form of containment. That's the association with respect of how to think of the digital. So the digital is code, it's formatting, but in this exterior way. So very different from signification and from signs and semiotics. It's code, it's algebraic. It's empty, but with content, no, but has an exterior relation to it. So this is the story. Hamacher brings this, in a beautiful line of reasoning, together with the term of representing as an activity, as das Vorstellen, and das Vorstellen as a relation of the out ahead, so das Voraus, and so this ex tempore is so outside of time, but of course it's still an out for us. So how to think these relations, and for him this is this goes together with a notion of the amphora of place, so involving space with intuition, but the space with intuition is thought through place, and this thinking it through place is what, in my understanding, his fascination with Pauselan and the meridian is. So the speech on the meridian, Poetics, no, where you have, for every word there is a counter word, for every picture or image there is a counter image. So everything goes in circle, but there's always the crossing of the equator and also the tropical line, which gives the continuous morphing and metamorphosis. And then the coding line, which gives discretion through standards, which in principle are arbitrary, but they become of great gravity and global scope with time that passes, and the habits of making reference to it. Yeah. And now to this early image. Why the goddess of shame? I have here, it's an arbitrary passage from some online German journal, but I thought it's somehow so plain in making it a topic. No? So shame, so it goes, die Scham ist ein schmerzliches, ein soziales und ein körperliches Gefühl. Sie wird dadurch ausgelöst, dass man bemerkt, wie die anderen einen abfällig oder fast schlimmer noch gar nicht anschauen. Dieser Blick der anderen sagt einem, du bist falsch, du gehörst nicht dazu. Das geht unter die plötzlich errötende Haut und tut so weh, dass man am liebsten im Erdboden versinken möchte. In extremen Fällen führt dies bis zum Suizid. Aber in gewissen Maßen hat die Scham, so sehr sie auch schmerzt, eine sinnvolle Aufgabe. Dadurch, dass der Einzelne lernt, und so weiter. Jetzt kommt das Didaktische. What is at stake for me is, no, in the text that you read with the comma, there is this role of the intimacy, which in Gottschalk's reading of the philosophy of the house is very complicated and also hard to sort out. And it's in relation to this intimacy that I think this discussion of the notion of shame becomes important, because Gottschalk says there is no privacy. There's no privacy anymore. For me, this was super counterintuitive, because in my perception, everything gets privatized. There is no public anymore. That would have been the story that I keep telling. But I understand what he means, and I think he's right. There is no privacy anymore because there is no care and no culture in dealing with respect somehow. With this notion of and this very present topic of shame, of coming to terms with that. No, this new autofiction. I don't remember the French author. There is this one French author who writes all these novels, and she kind of coined this notion of sociale Scham. Hmm? Yes, exactly. Any no, yeah. And I think it's a super important topic, because it does well. What it captures at the core is something that no enlightenment. So there can just never be equality in starting points. And I have not been educated, I've not been socialized with music. There's no way I can catch up. It's just gone. And there is, with these kind of things that we are all, no, in one way or another, either gifted with or deprived from, it would be horrible to neutralize them for the sake of a certain equality, I think. No? But we need to find ways of actively relating to this. It's not that I have a recipe or something, but I think we really need a notion of abstract way of relating to such a powerful moral feeling. That is not the thing with shame, is that we usually then relate it to guilt. I have still been taught, no, if somebody is ashamed of something, it means they have done it. No, of course not. Of course not. No, one can be, if one is censored today, or kind of cancelled, or staked, or scapegoated. Of course, one feels shame, but one hasn't done what one necessarily, no, what one is accused of. And these kind of relations in social, in this kind of social. What does Gottschalk say? He says there's no privacy, huh? There's no privacy, exactly. So there's no respect for the privacy. Everything has become public. That's what Gottschalk says in the philosophy of the home. So we need a philosophy of the home to protect a kind of a privacy. And for me, it was so counterintuitive, because I think everything has become private. There is no public anymore. But I think we mean the same thing, just from inside or from outside. And with this, so to address this, a zone of intimacy that is that fosters a public culture of respect in relation to it. This is out of proportion with the public effects that we can take today through shaming. No? So that's, it's not like one needs a reason for thinking these things, but I'm always glad if somehow I can see what it's helpful for. What it's helpful for. So then how to relate to such a notion of intimacy, which is not strictly private, and it's also not strictly public. But it's kind of, so it plays in the social, but it's not a question of social production. So it's a bodily feeling. It has something to do with, again, this kind of cosmic animism also, perhaps, if one doesn't want to relate it to a religion directly. So I think, this is missing also in the discussions of Bergson, no, as a phenomenon. And it's also, I think, a way that kind of, no, rather than, because it's almost like saying, I like poetics, but I'm interested in mathematical thinking. It's like, people immediately turn away, but so because they think the beauty of poetics goes away if one kind of flirts with this rationality. And with architecture, it's almost the same. No, with an architecture, either you're no longer an architect, you kind of make I don't know, social scenographies or something like that, or furnishings. But if you're an architect, you build for a long time. So these houses are not for an individual home of 20 years where a family feels comfortable. There is a larger story at stake in architecture. This has largely gone out of the discourses, and if it is taught at all, then only through history, where they would kind of memorize how architects used to think of their disciplines. But it's very straightforward. In architecture, you construct space a lot out of the shadows, and the shadows have a lot to do with these zones of intimacy, no? Of not purity, of not innocence, of not justice, but of I don't know, some kind of humanness also, perhaps. So architecture in this grand scale is a way, I really believe so, to accommodate things that are not commensurate with one another. I think this is the importance of architecture, and that's what makes architecture public. Architecture needs to provide accommodation for things that are not commensurate. And that's why in architecture, these what we now just call aesthetical styles, no? So decorums, the cosmics, the cosmetics was really constitutive for the kind of space that is abducted through an architecture that is actually being real. And I'm now a professor for architecture theory. This is really the line where I can find my main interests, not like added to a domain that is different, but actually very much coming out of there. I learned so much about everything I thought I had been educated through architecture. It's super surprising and absolutely fascinating. So with the shadows, it's a bit the inverse story of the gnomon, but of course very much related. And now to this out with. So this text by Gloria Meine, that's how she called it. I mentioned it in the beginning, no? When she says even immaterial things have a place where they have been produced. For her, the place is the blackboard or the tafel. And I have here some excerpts that show you how her argument goes. So, like Serres Gnomon-Text, no? Der vorliegende Text begibt sich zu den Anfängen der deduktiven Geometrie, zu erfahren, auf welchem Weg die Geometrie ihre Gegenstände und Verfahren von jeder Materialität reinigt. Doch selbst immaterielle Gegenstände haben einen Ort, an dem sie hergestellt werden. Sie brauchen einen Raum, an dem sie störungsfrei agieren können. Wie sähe dieser Raum aus? So that's her question. So she says this immateriality or the timelessness, so this pure relation to light, has basically cast out humans from the human way of thinking. If we think about thinking, geometry plays an important role, no? Or form thinking plays an important role. So what the Greeks have given us is not at all, like Michel Serres says, a mathematical language which everybody still speaks today, or more and more speaks today, but rather, she says, they have cast us out as humans of our own most proper capacity to think. So this is her story. That's why I said in the beginning, this is the hate story of it. And of course, she's right as well. Huh? So I think it doesn't help because it's one way to relate to it. We need metis. We need to invent other ways to relate to it. Historically, okay. So then she continues further to make it a bit more explicit. She writes, die eigentliche Erfindung der griechischen Mathematik, so scheint es, sind nicht Abstraktion und Idealität. Es ist vielmehr eine spezifische Architektur des Ausschlusses. In den Blick geraten so nicht mehr Eigenschaften, die jede Beschreibung fliehen, sondern der Ort, an dem die Mathematik ihre Aussagen formt. Dieser Ort ist eine Art Reinraum. In seinen Schleusen fallen alle Masse von den Gegenständen ab. That's the important thing. Eh? So she says there is no, so masse, the metrics, so the units of measuring and the numbers for counting. So what makes the mathematical quantification possible, she says, is taken directly of things. So that's a wholly different story than we had in antiquity through the pre-Socratics and through Pythagoras and so on, and through harmonics, so to relate numbers and mathematics to harmonics. Harmonics doesn't mean there is a belief in an original harmony. It's the mathematics of sound. It's the mathematics of music then as well, but primarily really the mathematics of sound, sonics phenomena, so hearing. And this she totally excludes. No, she says, no. Some people, it's like with property. No, some people have managed to make more fuss about what they want to see in it than others, and that's why there is an injustice at the core, which needs to be purged. And that's what she says. So the conquest moment works through getting rid of materiality. So that's her promise. And what this means, no, of the Gegenstände. So he says, hier in this Reinraum kann Euklid Sätze formulieren, die unmittelbar einleuchten. Was demselben gleich ist, ist auch einander gleich. Wenn Gleichem Gleiches hinzugefügt wird, sind die Ganzen gleich. Wenn von Gleichem Gleiches weggenommen wird, sind die Reste gleich. Euklids Axiome zeigen, was übrig bleibt, wenn die Materialität draußen bleibt. Sätze, die von ihrer Allgemeinheit kaum zu überbieten sind. Axiome seien Sätze, die durch sich selbst notwendig wahr seien, schreibt Aristoteles. Doch ihre Wahrheit ist nicht selbst evident. Sie muss erst mühsam hergestellt werden. So, and this is a bit like when Michel Serres with the gnomon says, yes, it's true that time has stopped for geometry, but the stopping is the constitutive act. No, it's the act of trespassing. It's the act of being involved what one finds. So the relation to the sun, and through the sun to time and to the weather and to all these phenomena is not cut. It's actually becoming the milieu of mathematical thinking. So she says a similar kind of act, like the act of stopping time, would have to be necessary with regard to proofs or evidence that we draw from mathematical forms of reasoning. So I think the two are not contradicting one another, they're actually complementing one another. But her argument goes to the social side and the subject philosophy side, and his argument goes to the natural philosophy and the mathematical side. But the point of both, actually, I think, is that they need one another, so they cannot be purified against one another. That's what makes their positions strong. And with the outwith now, so my question with the outwith, now I would say the without, this would be her point, no, about having evacuated. So she writes, Greek geometry, die griechische Geometrie hat stillschweigend die Menschen aus ihren Gedankengängen evakuiert und mit ihnen auch jede Materialität und Anwendung entfernt. So let's say this is a figuration of the relation, the without. No? So dieser Punkt im Außen, diese Reinheit. The punkt within, I would say, is also from her and from her text. I put this motif, where she writes, Mathematiker tragen selten Mundschutz oder weiße Kittel, aber sie besitzen durchaus sehr wirksame Techniken des Ausschlusses. Dass beispielsweise der Beweis nicht auf den tatsächlichen Konstruktionsweg protokolliert, sondern vielmehr einer abstrakten Anordnung des Wissens, nämlich der Axiomatik ihrer Gegenstände folgt, ist ein ungeschriebenes Gesetz. Die griechische Geometrie hat stillschweigend die Menschen aus ihren Gedankengängen evakuiert. Okay, das hätte jetzt eigentlich hier nicht auch nochmal sein müssen. Ja, aber the point is this. For her, it's like a totalization of history and the objects which make it, which make it. So axiomatics, it's not like there is one axiomatics. Oh, no, obviously. so this evidence that she says should be, so she says a proof in mathematics would be so much more valid if it would truly document how a scientist actually went about doing his experiments. No? So she asks for history instead of mathematics. But mathematics brackets time constitutively so, and finds insights that people in their experiments can work with whenever they are alive through history. So she wants to substitute the domain of abstraction with a kind of a realism of historical protocols. And this, I would say, is the within. No, so this is a kind of an enclosure within. It's a kind of a total immanence. This would be like an affirmed transcendence or something like that. And what I'm looking for with this out with is a kind of a chiastic relation between the two. A chiastic relation, perhaps it's called it. I'm not sure if chiastic. An out with. So to affirm abstraction and the intellect, but to keep emphatic and tempered with this immanence. And for both of them, kind of an stepping out of one's individual real existence would be necessary. And this is where the link to AI and so on comes in, no? Because AI it's all mathematics and it's all human. So it works the better that it standardizes and kind of puts mean values to human common sense of things. So this is it's more of a promise. No, I don't know how to make sense of this, but I think it would be important because I think we need to reaffirm intellect. It's not that the artificial intellect copies the human one and now it outperforms us, or we need to kind of preserve a purity of it that we have lost. No, we just need to shape up. We need to learn to think abstract again. And Hamacher is really just in my reading teaching this beautifully. No. So I would say Derrida teaches it in practice, Hamacher also poetically. No, Derrida is a kind of a moralist compared to Hamacher. So I have my troubles with Derrida, but I learned to think with Derrida with almost with nobody else. That's without a doubt. But Derrida is, I think he wants to be a Mentis. I don't buy it, he's not. Yeah, but these are these love stories. Huh? So they're always there, they make thinking beautiful. Here is the slide with the place notion of Hamacher. So for him, he takes it places in Aristotle, it's marked by two traits, by the fact that it is separate from the thing and by the fact that it is surrounding, not these two things, so separate and surrounding. So they're not, so what then these notions compete with is, for example, the notion of the sphere in Aristotle, no, or other things that are circumgiving or circumscribing, yeah. And he relates it to the Mitteilung, of course, in this German Kommunikationswissenschaft sense of imparting, so mitteilen, not just not so message focused, but kind of a distinction focused. So how to be distinctive. And then it's a with which is not a localized one. So it's a with which comes from place, not a localization. It would always be the mapping of the place. So with an absolute system. Okay. And surprisingly, this is a last turn, perhaps before I come to our text. Yes. This notion of the out with and then of the place and of the amphora has shown me another thing that I really wish I would have learned earlier, namely that there is a whole tradition of the phenomena, of thinking about the phenomena, which is not subject-centric. It's not idealist. So what they used to call the phenomena, and so here is a text. This is if you are interested in that, this is the reference, Fritz Kraft. I think he's still alive, but he's quite old now, like 92 or so. But he has an academia a website where he published everything. And it's really a different reading of the astronomy and cosmology development, always through the eyes of a mechanic and of mathematical thinking. I found him through a beautiful text where he gave a philological discussion of mechanics by just foregrounding that mechane, it means resourcefulness. So mechanics and mechane is totally related to metis. It's a kind of a cunning reason or of a storytelling that does not aim to say the truth plainly, no? Not because it wants to obscure, but because it doesn't believe it can be said plainly. No? So in mechanics, different from what we today call a tool, which is, or technology, basically, that's the thing, not technique, but technology, it says it's true, no? And it's necessary and it's absolute. Mechanics is never like that. It never explains why it works. It just figures out how a certain proportioning of forces or of weights or of forms can be put into an arrangement to produce a certain effect that then can be mastered, but it cannot be explained by them. So it's invented. It's not creativity, it's inventiveness. It's rhetorics. That's also the link. He wrote about this, and now I'm reading through his astronomical text, and it's fascinating. What they meant with saving the phenomena was literally in antiquity, when they were speculating about the fabrics of the heavens, there was this clear distinction between the fixed stars and then the wandering stars. And the wandering stars, in Plato's Timaeus, the wandering stars are explained as giving a moving image of eternity. It's how the demiurge introduces time into this cosmos. Because of course the cosmos needs to be, but one cannot make a similarity relation to eternity, no? Or a likeness relation. So it needs to be a mechanical model. This is the wandering stars. And the thing with the wandering stars is that their movement goes not just forwards and circular, they go retrograde, it changes constellations, they disappear, they shine, they do all sorts of movements that cannot be linearized, but they need to be deciphered or read, the constellations, before the background of the fixed stars, which give a kind of a reference system. That was the way that they were thinking. So saving the phenomena was to say, we cannot bring them to we cannot fix a representation relation between the orders of the constellation of the stars. That's also why that's the long legacy where before there was astronomy as a physics, no, a physics of the stars. There was always the interplay of astronomy as mechanical, abstract, geometric construction, and then astrology. So the influence of the stars to the way things are animated. And this basically just relaxed or found a more abstract formulation with Galileo and with Kepler, so with the physics of he describes the stories beautifully, and I love the idea that the phenomena, they have nothing to do with kind of a purity of perception. They're not subjectivist. It's in order to relax the relation to objects and between objects and subjects, it's enough to have the wandering stars in a symbolical sense. I'm making this very short because we're running out of time, but this is what Serre does in his Leibniz book. No? So Le Système de Leibniz, Essai, Modèle Mathématique, and the subtitle is Stars, Schemas, and Points. So it's about thinking networks without saying, wow, a network is a topology, no? And topology is not geometry. And then one fights the other, and then one goes with aesthetics, and the other goes with metrics. None of these silly stories, it's not these hate stories. They are all there, and they all have a place. And what they do together is open us up ways of how to relate to constellations of things. Not binary, not a line, not a triangulation, not a squaring, but figuring out phenomena in a Leibnizian, of course, understanding that, everything is conspiratory, but not like people tell bad stories and want to win the ones who don't know yet, but on a metaphysical level, things are in the harmonics means things are in conspiration with one another. And out of this, Serre develops a notion of relating to divination and to probabilistics and to thinking or involving randomness and chance with geometry, not in contradiction to it. That doesn't stop our thinking like randomizers do, and this kind of computing notions of chance often do. No, they say, okay, now we don't need to think with it because this is giving us a good approximation to things. Here, the same things are employed, but it helps us to keep our thinking in shape. So to master these abstractions that we need for today's physics. So for having a natural philosophy.
Maybe
that's it.
you can turn it. I mean,
yeah.
I
no,
think
the other thing I've mentioned, it's fine, it's good.
Maybe we can take it into the discussion.
Mm-hmm.
Or you just finish your thought.
Yeah, no, this is the way that Plato puts it with the wandering stars and the image of time. No? He says, when he introduces time, so the demiurge began to think of making a moving image of eternity. At the same time as he brought order to the universe, he would make an eternal image moving according to number of eternity remaining in unity. This, of course, is what we call time. The demiurge brought into being the sun, the moon, and the 5 other stars for the begetting of time. So time is something that the cosmos itself gives birth to, conceives and gives birth to. So it's a self-engendering of time. And this self-engendering is so close to the intuition that we have in Hamacher's extempore relation. And Hamacher's extempore relation, or the way to relate to this, is this is towards the end of his text, where he says, okay, so the production of time takes time. There is an asymmetry in the constitution of time, because this notion of time then gives us a measure for magnitudes, and it's a constitution of a self-contained representation of time that is called appreciable. So it's a constitution of a self-contained representation. Representation itself is the relation which we call time, if there is a form of time in Kant. And Hamacher puts it, he gives a constitution to that, with intuition and with the receptivity that he was meaning. And this is the same story like we have in Plato. And what Serre does on the opening page of his book is bring in humor. So he goes to the Commedia dell'arte. This is also why I was working with the pantomime in my story. So he goes to the Commedia dell'arte because he says the Commedia dell'arte kind of emerged around this Renaissance way of affirming abstraction without going to a utopia. Through the Emperor of the Moon, it was a very famous piece, one of the first written by a woman, and then produced everywhere by the Teatro dell'Arte. And it basically says, so the king of the moon is coming to Earth, and everybody dreams on another planet life would be beautiful. And he comes here and tells everybody, life where I'm coming from is just like it is here as well. And of course, what it stands for is that the moon is a place where there is no, it's not a sun. No? So the light on the moon is a pure reflection. Lacan has written powerfully about this. So, but Serre doesn't make a tragic story out of it. He kind of releases or unlocks the metis and the mechanics of this kind of thinking. So the Commedia dell'arte, in his way of reading, is very much in a literal sense. I would translate it as a theater of professionalism. So he affirms the mechanics, he affirms the arte, he affirms the quantification, and says he gives a professionalism, not disciplines, not fields of knowledge, not ontologies, just professionality. So people, es gibt ein Können, no, for certain things. And this is what this relation of mimesis can convey and share and teach. Yeah. This was it. This is the book, the cover. And they also work with the symmetry, technological accidents and accidental technologies. They changed it in the last moment. It was just technologies of the accident for a long time. Thank you.
Okay, so thank you, Vera. So since I think it was a little bit longer, not that we make now the 15 minutes break, not
10 maybe.
10 minutes. Okay, 10 minutes break. What's the time right now?
7:30.
7:30
Yeah.
already. Okay, so 10 minutes break, and then we come back for the questions.
Good.
Yeah, Q&A. Thank you.
And
So
we can post.
You can write 10 minutes break.
And if you have questions from online and Zoom, you can just type them in the chat or speak up, like raise your hand, you will have the opportunity.
Okay, so if you want to have, I will start. So